So this is coming to an end, and we as a people, we as a generation, we as a political party have to seriously think what we have to do to get our house in order. We have to live within our means. We have to cut back. We have to start whittling away at the deficit. But if we just got to a balanced budget, a real balanced budget, believe me, there would be restoration of confidence in the dollar. But right now, we're talking only about energy in Washington, and rightfully so, that we should. And I was on a talk show yesterday, and they said, well, right, it's the supply and demand of energy. What else is there to this? And I said, yes, there's another equation to it. It's the supply and demand of the dollars. Because if your dollar is going down and they want more dollars to buy euros, it's going to push the price of energy up. So yes, the supply, that's why we should have more supplies. We should be drilling. We should be doing all these things. I sort of like the idea about how energy was developed in Texas. You know, fortunately, when we came into the Union, at that time it was a country, and when we came in, the land was owned privately. I sort of think, and my daydream is thinking about a state like Montana. What would it have been like if you up here owned all your land and the government owned very little? And then you could develop your natural resources. Instead of having this football playing game that we have to do in Washington, D.C., it becomes politicized, so the people in Massachusetts and Connecticut tell you what you can do with your land over here. So someday maybe we'll move in that direction. But my argument being is local government, private property ownership, supplies being developed by the marketplace. But we get in the way of developing supplies. For instance, we decided it's good for corn. I mean, we're going to have ethanol from corn, so we subsidize it. Then after years and years of billions of dollars of subsidies, we find out it's not the most efficient. That we punish those people who want to do it from sugar cane, and yet you get more ethanol from sugar cane. But the one more astounding thing is, and this might even apply to this state, I know it applies to the Dakotas, is the most efficient way, substance that you can get ethanol from happens to be hemp. But we've had this hysteria about hemp having something to do with marijuana, so it's been illegal since 1937. You can make thousands of products, including health products, out of hemp. Matter of fact, somebody, to make a point, this Father's Day, my son gave me a shirt made out of hemp. It's a pretty nice shirt, too. But hemp can be raised in Canada, and we buy their products. So we get in the way of doing efficient things, and we subsidize the dumb things, and then what do we talk about? Nuclear power plants. I think the market ought to decide. I happen to have a personal belief, but I'm not as smart as the market. I think nuclear power is great. I think we should have more nuclear power plants. But we're in the way of developing nuclear power plants. Somebody told me the other day, they said, you know, if we built a nuclear power plant in every state in this country, that we would have so much energy we could be exporting energy. But we're in the way of energy, in the way of nuclear power and subsidizing the wrong things and having no confidence that the market can solve our problem. So what do we do in Washington? They say, well, we need alternative fuels. So they tax you, give the money to the politicians, then the politicians pass it out to their favorite energy companies to subsidize R&D. That's not the way the market works. The market works that if there's a true shortage of oil and the price goes up, we'll use less. But somebody's going to develop something alternative, just so they have minimal regulations and no taxes on it, so that they can go out and develop these new energy sources. That's what we really need. But for all the problems that we face, there's much to be grateful for. And I am indeed grateful for the opportunities that I've had. I have been blessed to have been able to practice medicine, have a large family, and been able to participate in politics because I have one goal in life, and that is try my very best to understand why America has been so great. And I have come up with a decision. It's because we had been the freest country in the world. And I see that our freedoms are going down. We do not work, especially as conservatives, we do not work hard enough to protect liberties and privacy. And there's no reason to be embarrassed. Don't think that the liberal left are supposed to protect privacy and that we're supposed to undermine privacy. We should defend the 10 amendments. And there's no reason for us to not look at what has made this country great. We have indeed been blessed. We have been the freest, and we have been the most prosperous, but we're losing it now. And I so often simplify my delight in freedom and my confidence in freedom by saying, not only does freedom work, freedom is popular too. People love it. But it's non-confrontational. It brings people together because just because people use their freedom in a different manner doesn't mean that we have to be against it. We have to be tolerant of the way they reason. Just the way we can understand it on economics, people might want to spend their money on different things, and we don't want to have cradle-to-grave operations and tell people exactly what to do. But freedom really works. Freedom is a new idea. It's relatively very new, just hundreds of years old, and we really got the experiment with it. We have seen the blessings of freedom, but we're also witnessing now the undermining of our liberties. Our national defense spread too far around the world here, and now we're more vulnerable than ever, and we see now that something has to be done. But we're not as bad off as the Soviet system. The Soviet system collapsed for economic reasons. We didn't have to fight them. I was drafted when I thought we might have to fight them in 1962 during the Cuban crisis. But we didn't have to fight them because they had a flawed system. And we ought to recognize the goodness of America, but we ought to be aware of the flaws in our system. We have flaws in the growth of government at the national level. We have flaws in not understanding defending national security and too much dependency on these international organizations, too much dependency on the United Nations, the IMF, and the World Bank, and the WTO. And along that line, I'm also convinced that our freedoms will not be enhanced by a North American Union or developing a North American NAFTA highway. We don't need that. But if we understand the ideas of freedom and liberty, it will introduce a notion that sometimes is offensive to others, and that is that there will not be perfect equality. But that shouldn't be our goal. Our goal should be equal justice. And we will never, once we set the goal as equality, which the left wants to do all the time, you end up with socialism, and you might end up with equality. They may well be successful, but it's going to be equality and poverty. And that is why we must understand that the marketplace is what creates. Governments can't create. Most of the energy comes from people who are free. And this is the reason that we have to understand that the release of the creative energy by free people is what allows us to develop and to produce. When free people are given this responsibility, then our goal should be to promote virtue and excellence. That, to me, is what life is all about. Through our families, virtue and excellence. Governments can't do this. They can't do it economically, and they can't do it personally. But once you turn it over to the government and give the responsibility of the government to promote excellence in our personal lives and teach us about habits, or turn it over to them for economic reasons, they can only do it at the expense of liberty, and it always fails. And we have gotten soft on the issue of liberty. We have lost our confidence. What we need is confidence that freedom really works and that America works. America is great and good. But I am firmly convinced you cannot spread goodness with force. You can't go to your neighbor and grab his collar and say, you don't go to church and you don't do this and you don't raise your kids right. What you do is you set a good example and you show that you're a happy, thriving, good family, and then maybe your neighbor will emulate us. That's what we should do around the world. Thank you very much.